Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the InduSoft webinar, Packaging Machine Automation Trends, Solutions, and Operations. My name is Scott Courtier. I'm Senior Technical Sales with InduSoft. And today we're going to be covering a quick introduction to InduSoft. I'm going to try to make it not so salesy, but more how does this stuff relate to packaging. We'll bring up some trends in packaging machinery and automation based on some observations from Pack Expo, from some insights from some different trade organization reports and papers. And then we'll talk about some of our templates that we have, some add-ons that are related to packaging, and some features specifically related to packaging. And I'll demonstrate some of those, and talk about some efficiencies and predictive concepts, again, InduSoft related to packaging, and some different resources that we have that you may not be aware of. Quick logistics, again, for those who are just joining us. If you didn't know, if you haven't joined us on this type of webinar before, we can't hear you. So if you have any questions or comments, please put those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel on your WebEx interface. If you didn't know, you can make that thing full screen and then get at the WebEx interface via a little drop down at the top of the screen. So that might make it a little bit easier to see if you go full screen. Also, we will be recording this and post it within a couple of days, usually on our website and our YouTube channel. And we'll send out a survey. And if you would, let us know how we're doing today and how we're doing in general and what other topics you'd like to see. And if you'd like to participate in a webinar with us or a case study, we'd love to have you. And love to see if the topic fits what people are looking for. We'd love to listen to our customers. So let us know on that. And if you send us your name, shirt size, and address, we're going to send you a free T-shirt just for joining us today. So we'd like to thank you for that. So let's go ahead and get started here. And a quick overview on InduSoft. Now, I'm not going to read all of these slides, but I want to talk a little bit about who we are and what we're doing. I see some new names here on the attendee list. InduSoft has been around since 1997, and in 2013 we were actually purchased by Invensys, who owns the Wonderware brand, and then in turn Invensys was purchased by Schneider Electric in the beginning of 2014. We have since added the Wonderware brand in front of the InduSoft product name, so now you can see it's Wonderware InduSoft Web Studio. And a handful of things that might be relevant. We have really the first package to have Microsoft Windows CE as a first full HMI package for Windows CE. And how is that relevant? Is a lot of HMIs and a lot of packaging machinery will have Windows CE and an embedded panel on as a touchscreen, industrial touchscreen on the machine. As well as we have a patent for our database connectivity, and this is becoming more and more important as you try to get data out of embedded devices that normally couldn't connect to a database. And I'll demonstrate a little bit of our connectivity there as we get going. In addition, something that we've come up with in the last couple of years is HTML5 integration and a new platform agnostic runtime for HMI called IOT View, and this is running on Linux and VxWorks and displaying on HTML5 browsers, and the ability to display on iPads and tablets and Android and things of that nature really help packaging machines become much more efficient. The next slide here, if you're not familiar with who InduSoft is and what we do as a product, not sure how you joined the webinar, if you got our email or saw an advertisement or joined us through a colleague. But InduSoft Web Studio, which is the name of the product, is an easy-to-use, yet still very powerful and very affordable HMI and SCADA software. As I've traveled around the world and talked to a lot of different people, one of the things that I see is that people will often have the notion or the idea that InduSoft is either HMI or SCADA, and they don't realize that it's such a scalable product and can go from very, very low end to very, very high end across the board for industrial panels, running on a desktop, a laptop, embedded, or even mobile devices. And you can run this product on any current Microsoft operating system. If you look down here at the bottom, you'll see that it'll run on Windows CE, Windows Mobile, Embedded, for example, Embedded Standard 7, Desktop and Server Edition, so Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1, and even Windows 10, where some of our competitors are still struggling to get on Windows 8. And we'll even run on server editions. So lots of different formats and capabilities there. And now we even have runtimes that will run on Linux, VxWorks, and we're planning on coming out with other operating system support as well. So investment protection, what does this mean? Well, how does this relate to packaging? You're going to find that in the packaging world, at least in North America anyway, we're seeing that one vendor is pretty typical. One of our competitors is pretty typical. A large percentage of the packaging machines will have that particular type of HMI on it. And what we've also seen, and then we hear a lot of complaints about from customers of that vendor, is that they change their software every few years, make it incompatible with the previous version, and you have to pay for upgrades and pay for maintenance and pay for support and all kinds of things. Well, we keep compatibility. We've kept compatibility with going all the way back to version 1. And I can tell you from experience, having been a customer of InduSoft before I was an employee, and having developed an application back in the 90s that used really, at the time, every feature that was available in the product. And that particular customer came back to us recently and said, hey, can we upgrade to version 8? And we want to take advantage of some of the new features in the product. And we did that along with them, and we brought it in, and there was 100% functionality. We added new features in and deployed that over their Christmas break. And it was really nice to see that there was no changes that were necessary. Everything came forward, and as you probably have seen, if you're in the packaging industry, that's a pretty rare thing and a pretty nice thing to be able to do. Platform agnostic runtime. Well, let's talk a little bit about where and how InduSoft runs on these different environments. You can get InduSoft Web Studio, or what we call our full runtime, to run on any of the desktop or server operating systems that are put up by Microsoft. In addition to that, we have the Embedded View license, which is for Windows Embedded, and CE View for what's been known as Windows CE, now Windows Embedded Compact. And the really nice thing is you can deploy this by developing from a single project and deploying on any of those operating systems. And now what we've done is we've actually added this new license called IOT View, which will run on Linux and VxWorks and plan to run on other devices. Why is this important, and what's the idea behind this? Well, you may have heard of the Internet of Things, and if you haven't, you should probably check that out, or IIoT, which is Industrial Internet of Things, or there's some other phrases being used in Europe and Asia. But the idea is, let's say you have some components, maybe a valve or a pump or a flow control or some type of device that might be on your packaging machine that you would like to monitor. Now, currently, you probably have to monitor through the PLC or through some other architecture to be able to collect that data. Imagine embedding InduSoft right in one of those endpoint devices, like a smart flow meter or some type of pump control, and being able to collect and analyze the data out of those devices directly without having to go through the PLC, burden the PLC, and potentially miss data. It's kind of neat when you think about, if you're familiar with motion control and a feedback loop, and being able to not only know where you want to go, but where you're currently at and how fast you're going, and be able to correct for that and analyze that information. Well, that's what Internet of Things is kind of doing. That's what IoT View will help you do, is collect data out of those endpoint devices and being able to analyze and make decisions, important decisions, on how things are running and where you're at. So, for example, wouldn't it be interesting if a pump could tell you that it's going to fail soon, or it's running high current draw, so you know that there's some problems with it, and not having to go through the PLC, and compare that with other machines. Another example might be if you have 10 machines in your facility, and maybe they're all the same machine producing the same type of product, and one is not keeping up with the other ones, you know that there's some issues there, and maybe the pumps or the valves or the smart meters can tell you that themselves, and that's the idea of this IoT View product. But the real nice thing is being able to develop from one single development environment, one project, and potentially deploy it on all those different devices. And as I said, deploying could be as an HMI, a touchscreen on a particular machine. You could use it as a SCADA device that could be monitoring multiple machines or multiple HMIs, tie in with your MES or your ERP systems, historians, things of that nature. Or you could even run on embedded or mobile devices, maybe a handheld barcode scanner. It could be deployed on one of those types of devices. When we're talking about this scalability, and I'll bring this up in a little bit, envision this. If you're a packaging machine manufacturer, what if you could deploy a standard edition project or your standard machine, or maybe you're on a 12-inch touchscreen, and then you could offer your customers a low end, maybe on a 10 or an 8-inch touchscreen, and a high end on a 15 or a 19-inch touchscreen, but still run that same project without making any changes to it, and just have it auto-configure for the high end or the low end features without having to maintain 3 separate projects. That's often a great big desire. That company that I mentioned earlier that I developed their project, we actually consolidated 50 different machines into one individual project. So great concept there. Moving on to the next slide here. A concept to talk about is thin clients. Now this can help packaging machine manufacturers be much more efficient, and a few different concepts here. For example, this web thin client, this uses Internet Explorer, and real common, going to be on desktops and laptops. You go into a production supervisor, a maintenance manager, go into their office, open up Internet Explorer, and they can point to the IP address of the machine that they want to look at and view the screens, view all the animations, and with security, optionally interact with that machine. And again, security and or it's optional whether or not you would allow them to interact with that machine remotely. But they can see production counts and how things are running. And then, so we've had that for years, that what we call the web thin client. And then customers, a lot like yourselves in the packaging industry, have asked us for, we don't want to put Internet Explorer out on our machines, but we have a large machine or a long machine, and we want to put a duplicate HMI out there. How can we do that? So we came up with this idea of Secure Viewer Thin Client. And what it is essentially a remote runtime. It gets its screens, its graphics, and data from the main runtime, and it looks and feels just like the real runtime. Only you can deploy this on the other side of your machine at the end of a long machine. In fact, you can deploy up to 128 of these around your plant, and you wouldn't even know that it's not the real runtime. Another way that you can use this in a real nice method is to be able to display andon or production monitoring type solutions, where you might have the HMI on the machine, but then feeding a Secure Viewer client on a high-definition TV up in the rafters so you can see production, showing actual and target amounts, and really displaying an entirely different screen than the HMI is on the machine, but the application is all included on that one project on the machine. So that's another opportunity. So then, within the last few years, we've come out with Studio Mobile Access, and what that allows you to do is view and interact, again, optionally with security, your screens on tablets, smartphones, and other devices, so that you could Android device and be able to walk around and be able to view and, again, optionally interact with that machine on an Android tablet, an iPad, an iPhone, a Linux device running a Chrome or Safari browser. Now, how that works is based on HTML5. And if you think about, if you go back in the maybe not so distant future, maybe 10, 15 years, it wasn't so uncommon to have one operator for every individual machine that was out there. But now you're gonna probably find out, and it's unfortunate but true, there's probably 2 or 3 operators for 10 machines, let's say. And so having a smartphone or some type of smart device, a tablet, and being able to make decisions, where do I need to go to next of these 10 or so machines, maybe it's hundreds of machines, what do I need to pay attention to next, what are the critical issues, maintenance staff, rather than going back to get paperwork and check an email and where do I go next, let the machines themselves tell you what's going on and be able to be much, much more efficient. And when you think about this, if you've ever heard any of my webinars, I often bring up this concept of your machines producing a product are like a printing press for money. And if you can keep those running, you're printing more money. And if they stop for whatever reason and you can get them going again quickly and efficiently, well, you're making more money. And that's good for your job and good for the company, and a great way to keep things running. So using a remote device with Studio Mobile Access on it can help your machines stay running longer. A few different concepts on this slide. You know, we've been talking about HMIs on a machine and these different thin clients. Just to let you know, you can run in a video wall type situation. We can run create projects that are as small as 240 pixels by 240 pixels, all the way up to 10,000 by 10,000 pixels, and that's I think roughly 45 high-definition monitors if you can find the hardware to drive all that. But really interesting is I think I saw the one of the largest that I've ever seen anyway has been 8 70-inch monitors connected together, and that was very, very impressive. Gentleman standing next to it looked very, very small next to 8 70-inch monitors. But lots of different ways to deploy this product, and it doesn't have to be like a single HMI talking to a single PLC. There's lots of network solutions. You can have machines with your HMIs running InduSoft, and then a server acting as SCADA, data collection, lots of different ways, even through the cloud. I'm going to briefly talk about this and our connectivity and how it relates to packaging. If you take a look at, most HMIs, the typical idea is we're going to communicate to a PLC and display that information. But we take that a little bit further. We have over 240, actually I think we're over 250 drivers now that are built into the product to communicate with not only PLCs, but things like temperature controllers, drives, and other devices that talk, just about every protocol that you can imagine. But if you take a look and notice that these arrows are bidirectional and that we list multiple PLCs, depending on the license that you get, you could actually communicate, let's say, from an Omron or a Beckhoff PLC to an Allen Bradley or a Siemens PLC or any combination thereof. And this really allows the flexibility to be able to communicate from different equipment that has to connect together that's maybe come into your plant over the years that are dissimilar PLCs, and be able to get that information from one to the other. Also, it's not going to be uncommon to find equipment on machines or connect to older machines that are maybe serial devices. We've been writing these drivers for a long time, and we have RS-232-based drivers, RS-45 drivers, serial, as well as dedicated cards, things like DeviceNet and CAN bus and things of that nature. So to be able to communicate to these things like temperature controllers and be able to get that information out of those devices into InduSoft Web Studio tags and then out to a database is quite amazing. Maybe not even communicating to the PLC, communicating directly to those temperature controllers or drives or motion controllers. And never before did you ever think that you could get information up to a database from those serial legacy type devices. So it's kind of neat. In addition to the drivers that we have built in, we have OPC clients of just about every flavor that there is, and we work really strongly with the OPC Foundation and making sure that our products are compliant and tested, as well as not only a client, but we can actually be an OPC server and send our information out to other devices. So in your packaging environment, if you have other devices that can be OPC clients and they need to get information out of InduSoft, we can be the server for that as well. Briefly on our database connectivity, and you'll see why I'm talking about databases in the next few slides and talking about some of the trends in packaging. But being able to get information really from any SQL database, whether it's Microsoft SQL Server, and if you didn't know, Microsoft has Microsoft SQL Server Express, which is free. It could be an Oracle database, Sybase, FoxPro, MySQL, or historians such as OSI Pi. I think GE even has a historian. So being able to get in that environment and get to those SQL type databases, even sometimes in some occasions SAP can use SQL as well. Or you can treat Microsoft Access or Excel as databases if you want. And that's a little bit further than I like to see people go, because a lot of times they fill up the Access database and it gets too slow and don't even realize what's going on. But we're doing this all with standard technologies. And what's really nice when you use things like our alarms, our trends, our events, our grid object, quite often you don't even have to know SQL. I'm going to do a demonstration using our trending and show you how to do that to a database without knowing anything about SQL. We also have redundancy and store and forward features built in when data collection is a must based on certain requirements for reporting and things of that nature. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So trends in packaging. Some bits and pieces of information that we've gotten from different studies and reports and observations. The world market for packaging machinery is going to have predicted anyway a compound annual growth rate of approaching 3%, just over 2.5%, and projected for 2019 to be at $43.7 billion. So that's going to, an annual growth rate of 2.6% in the next few years. That's compounding. So, it's expected pretty good growth for packaging machinery. It's not a downturn. It's not stagnant, but it's growth. And this particular report showed that China is forecast to grow the fastest at about 5.6% between 2014 and 2019. So throughout that area of the world, through population growth and just different efficiencies and different products coming on, you're going to see some growth in that area. So I know we have a lot of different attendees from all over the world, and so if that's your area, expect some growth. Some other things that are happening are mass customization, or what's also known as personal choice, and just a huge explosion of different product SKUs or SKUs, which means a lot of companies are taking the same products and then just repackaging them in different types of packaging based on choice. I know that sometimes when I order stuff off of Amazon, they give me a choice of, do I want barrier-free packaging? That I always say yes, because it often opens easier than those plastic clamshells. But depending on the environment or the end production, I should say end consumer of those products, might depend on how they're packaged. But what these studies have shown is this is going to create increased variations and drive additional growth in the filling and closing type machines. So you should be able to see some additional growth in those areas. And we'll talk about some different ideas for the different types of packaging machines. I noticed at Pack Expo last year that larger end users have an interest in PackML. If you're not familiar with PackML, I'm going to cover a template that we have here in a little bit. And basically what it does is it standardizes packaging machinery conversations, if you will, and make sure everybody's talking the same talk. And we have some templates or a template to be able to do that, and I'll show you that and demonstrate that a little bit. And one of the other things that I found in some of these reports is increased food legislation. Now, it could be safety standards, it could be traceability, but found several throughout Europe, throughout the U.S., and throughout Asia, especially when it comes to food safety and handling procedures, how some of these different countries are doing this. There is in the United States, there is an FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has put out this Code of Federal Regulations. And you're going to see this 21 CFR Part 11 related typically to the pharmaceutical manufacturing. And what I found interesting is that in China, the equivalent of of the Food and Drug Administration, they've actually made it mandatory at the end of last year. So now it's official that they will serialize and trace pharmaceuticals all the way from manufacturing to when they're dispensed. So that's a huge amount of data to be collected, monitored, maintained, and InduSoft can certainly help work with that. Some other trends that we've seen is the idea of dumbing down the graphics, or using grayscale graphics to not overcomplicate things. If you take a look at the image on the bottom, can you tell where the issue is, where the problem is? And if you're not colorblind, which if you didn't know, about 10% of men are colorblind, you'll see that in the top image using grayscale, you can see, oh, right there's the problem, especially if that was blinking. So it's a good idea to not only change colors, but change symbols, change words to be able to enunciate problems and find things. And that just makes it so much more easy to do. If you take a look back in a few years ago, the trend was flashier graphics, heavy duty on the 3D shading and all of this, when now we're finding it's much easier to keep a machine running when the typical run mode, all the machine might be in grayscale, or the particular ideas of what you want to monitor. Another concept is overall equipment effectiveness, or what's known as OEE. And this functionality is really used throughout the packaging industry and manufacturing industry to be able to monitor equipment. And if it's, let's say, supposed to be, at least here in the U.S., supposed to be running it for an 8-hour shift, and it's only running for 6 hours, well, what is it doing for those other 6 hours? Other 2 hours. And if you can, find out what it's doing during that time and improve upon that, you've got an opportunity for 25% more production without increasing, adding people or adding additional capital equipment. So just a little bit of software in their monitoring can really help that out, as well as changeover times. When if a machine goes down because of you have to change over from one particular product to another product, what are some things that InduSoft can help your packaging machine change over, reduce those times? Things like recipes, built-in recipes, and automate those types of things rather than making them manual entries. Make those automated and come at the end of cycle change, and watching out for allergens and getting the wrong product in the wrong packaging and forcing recalls, expensive recalls. InduSoft can help track that and understand what's going on. So related to OEE and some of the other ideas that I've mentioned, PackML, what are some of the templates and add-ons that we have related to the packaging industry? The first one is called PackML, and there's a picture of it here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my other screen and bring in the demo that we have. Now this is PC demo, and if you already have InduSoft Web Studio version 8, you already have this demo. And what I'd like to show you on here is that when you run this demo, you're going to find that there are not only descriptions or examples of what the product does, but there's also this idea of some different solutions and what we can do. And let me go back here and wait for this to start running here. But things like the PackML template and the OEE template, we have versions of them built into the product, so you can see those. And trying to get to my screens here. There we go. So things like this is the PackML template. And if I wanted to say, okay, this is clear, and I can start this machine or reset it and tell it to start, the idea is to let this get into a state where it's sitting here in the execute mode, and that's where it will run. And the idea behind PackML is to allow different packaging equipment to use a common language. For example, if the machine is stopped, is it stopped? Is it halted? Is it stopping? What is the state of it? And it commonizes that language. And I've actually seen examples where some Allen Bradley PLCs were talking to Siemens PLCs using PackML and be able to, using that commonality, be able to share information between, again, dissimilar brands of PLCs. So this PackML template is included. Feel free to take it and use it. In addition to that, let me go back to the presentation. OEE, overall equipment effectiveness. We also have a template built in for that, and that's right here in the demo. And in this case, you can see that we can monitor. We have this set up for 5 different machines, and you can just click on a picture of the machine, and you can see the data sets changing. Now, this is actually coming from, I believe this is stored in a Microsoft Access database so that we can make this portable for the demo. But normally we would point this to probably typically a Microsoft SQL or MySQL database. In addition to not only being able to change the machines, we can watch the shift, the day, the week, the month, the year, and watch the top losses and be able to understand what are the most time-consuming losses in production that we have. Let me go back to my presentation and give you an idea. The idea of this is measure, don't guess. When I've seen different people around the world, different manufacturing environments trying to guess what the problem is, they're often wrong, and they don't really realize what's going on, so measure that. Now, what do I mean by low-hanging fruit? If you're in the U.S. or North America, you might understand that phrase, but if you're not, let me explain. The idea is to take the easy opportunities and fix the easy things first, and just again by monitoring what are the biggest time consumers, the biggest losses. Was it product changeover? Is it you don't have enough manpower? Is it, what are those things, and fix those things to keep production running, and be informed to be able to make educated guesses, not educated guesses, but informed decisions, and be able to make the right decisions to keep your equipment running longer and producing a higher quality product. Something else that we have is this business intelligence dashboard, and you can see a picture of it here. And this is essentially an InduSoft project, but it's really well written in the fact that it just takes a minute or two to be able to point to a data source. Let's say it's a SQL database. You can pick your database, you can pick the table inside of that, and then tell it, okay, I want 2 diagrams on the left and 1 big one on the right, or 1 big one in the middle, or a big one on the left and a big one on the right. Set that orientation, and then tell it, I want a pie chart in the top left, I want a table in the lower left, and then a Pareto chart on the right side. Go get that data and tell it what to put in there, and basically as long as it's taken me to describe that, you can then start to analyze your data very, very simply. And that data does not have to come from InduSoft. We can look at databases that are populated from other sources, be able to analyze that and show that to you quickly. So even if you have other machines that have collected data or from other sources, you can use the InduSoft BI dashboard to be able to look at those data sets as well. Another thing that we came out with earlier this year is a machine builder template. Now what I'm going to do is let me go back into InduSoft Web Studio and open that up. So here's the machine builder template, and what this was done for is to offer, if you're a machine builder, kind of a starting point to have the foundation for the screens already generated, where you might have a main screen, an alarm screen, a trend screen. Let me go ahead and run this. And this is all pre-created and documented for you to be able to insert your own logo, insert a picture of your machine, to be able to change modes and track events. So for example, when does the machine go into manual mode? Can I track when that happened? What user was causing that? Can I show the different alarms, either in an online mode and what has been acknowledged, when was it acknowledged, and in a historical mode? I can go back and take a look at that as well. This input-output is showing a card, an I/O card, in a PLC rack, and we've annotated it. And this is actually a symbol that's available in InduSoft, the current versions of version 8, as well as on our website. You can grab this as a symbol for free. And the idea here was to allow you to create multiple pages and show different I/O cards and make it easy, so you don't have to open up the panel to troubleshoot what input is on, and especially in environments where that might be unsafe to do. You can also show production status. Here's some more symbols that we have to be able to show production status. And this you could display again on a large screen up in the rafters to be able to see that from from many, many meters or many, many feet away. And notice that some of these will change when the threshold gets above a particular level. Also built in here is production reporting. I'm going to click on this a few times, and this will be able to show you that how we can format and create some reports. And then there's also some file management. We can delete those reports and clean up after ourselves if you wanted to. And all of this could be automated. It doesn't have to be based on buttons. But then trending is built in here, so some trending examples, taking data, and then status of what's going on that HMI. And again, this is all free. This machine builder template is free on the website and just ready for use. So feel free to go ahead and take a look for that and download that and use that. And let's see. So let's take a look and demonstrate here some of the features of InduSoft that are related to packaging. Before I get started here, let me grab a quick drink of water here. Sorry about that. Okay, communication. Again, if you're in North America, in which I recognize that a lot of you probably are not, but we see a large number of packaging machines with AB equipment on it. But I'll talk a little bit about configuring and talking to Allen Bradley equipment and show you and demonstrate that in a minute. But we can also communicate to OPC. If we didn't have a driver, let's say Omron, Beckhoff, Mitsubishi, Siemens, all those drivers are included. But if we had didn't have a driver, didn't have a particular feature, you can always use OPC to communicate. And sometimes what I've seen is that even though InduSoft will probably have a driver that you need, there's a chance that there's some other auxiliary equipment that has come in that you need to communicate to, and you can use OPC for that. As I mentioned, there are other devices. It doesn't have to be a PLC. We can talk to temperature controllers, motion control, drives, other types of devices that are out there that have some type of communication interface. So don't just think of InduSoft as communicating to only PLCs. Then there's this concept of tag integration. Let me go ahead and switch over to the development environment. And I'm going to create a brand new project here in InduSoft Web Studio. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure this screen. Now, my laptop happens to be 1920 by 1080, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a project that uses a screen size of 1024 by 768, and I'm doing that on purpose because that's a fairly common size that you might find on an HMI, an industrial HMI, industrial PC on a packaging machine, and I also, in a little bit, want to show you a concept of auto-scaling the screen. So I've created that project, and if I have put, let's say, on the screen, I'm just going to create a simple screen here, and maybe I put a rectangle on the screen and I put a bar graph on there, and maybe I've tied that to a temperature tag. And that tag maybe needs to come from the PLC. I need to define that tag first within InduSoft Web Studio. Maybe that temperature is a real type tag. At this point, then, I could go to my PLC drivers here under communication. I could insert a driver and choose from all the different protocols that we have. I wanted to show you briefly how to communicate with an Allen Bradley PLC, or at least the general concept of it, and then talk about a nice feature that we have. So if I add that to the project, click on OK, and then here under drivers, I open up this idea of the main driver sheet. Now I could tie that tag, that temperature tag, through an IP address, that's what the station field is for, to the I/O address in the PLC. And if it happens to be a ControlLogix PLC, that could be the tag name, or if you have it mapped to the old PLC 5 style addressing, it could be like N7:0 in there if you have it mapped, but it depends on what type of PLC you're using and what type of driver you're using. But the general idea is this is the glue that ties the InduSoft tag name to the PLC I/O address. Now this main driver sheet by default reads at 600 millisecond update rate, which is fine for most HMIs, but if you need more control over that, and the idea here is really you could put any I/O type address and talk to different PLCs in here, But if you need more control over that, what you can do is you can insert another driver sheet, and up here in the top you get the ability to trigger when you want it to read, when you want it to write, and if you want it to just read in the background or write whenever there's a tag change, you can do that. But instead of going and putting in all the different addresses, you have a particular memory type that you have a little bit more control over here to be able to read from that memory area in the PLC and create multiple of these sheets and be able to handle that in a more productive way, more efficient way. For example, I went to a customer site one time and they said, hey, my communications is too slow. Well, they were reading in thousands of part names every time the machine ran. And I said, well, do you need to do that every time? They said, no, we only need to do that once a day. So we moved all of that stuff out to a standard driver sheet and triggered that once per day whenever the database updated, and that fixed their entire problem. So it was more of a development to design issue than a slow driver or anything. So the reason I brought these two driver sheets up is this is to show you how we've developed, how you can tie tags to PLC I/O addresses. But what I wanted to show you is kind of a different way, and this is what's called tag integration. And if we go into, let me make sure my project is stopped. Let me save my screen here, and I'll call this main when this comes up. And just to make sure I don't forget this step, what I'll do is I'll make sure that the main screen is my startup screen. Okay, so now tag integration. I can go here under Project and Communication and set up a source for my tag integration. And what this can use is different PLCs export files or their different tag databases or I/O databases, whether it be from Automation Direct, Schneider Unity Pro, some of the Allen Bradley devices, Codesys, or even TwinCap. But if you're using RS Logix 5000, let's say, on a packaging machine and wanted to, say, call this my PLC, I can add that as a source, and now what I can do is give this an IP address and point to the L5K file. And if you're not familiar with the L5K file, that's the export from the Allen Bradley RS Logix or Rockwell RS Logix software. And I just happen to have one of these on my laptop, and what I can do is go grab that and import that, and that'll bring that in. And what this does, if you notice, hopefully you can see this on the WebEx, but down in my status bar, down in the absolute very right corner, it says tag count 1. That's that temperature tag that I brought in. And even though that I've imported that whole L5K file from the PLC, it hasn't increased my tag count. Now, if I go back to the bar graph here and I make a copy of that, I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't have to hit Control-C and Control-V. I just held down the Control key and dragged a copy of it off. Makes for a nice, efficient screen generation. Instead of tying this to the tag called temperature, what I'm going to do is browse not to my project tags, but to my devices or the things that I have tied to tag integration. I don't know if I explicitly said it, but I had typed in my PLC, and here's all of the tags from that particular PLC that were brought in. And maybe I want to tie this bar graph to this bearing 1 temperature. When I click on OK, first of all, notice that how, hopefully this comes through on the WebEx, all of these are kind of grayed out or subdued a little bit. When I pick that bearing temperature, and if I go, notice that it's put it into my tag expression here, but if I go back in and look, that one is now highlighted, and now I have 2 tags in my project. It doesn't add all of those tags to my project, just the ones that I've used. And you can refresh this and update this based on when the PLC changes take place. But that's a real easy way to create a connection to your PLC, especially with an Allen Bradley solution that you quite possibly have on a packaging machine if you're in North America. So I wanted to point that idea of tag integration. We also have the ability to communicate to barcode readers, RFID scanners, things of that nature. And the database connectivity that we have is kind of really unsurpassed in this type of environment. Let me show you just how easy it is to get information in and out of InduSoft Web Studio. For example, if I wanted to take, let me go back to this first bar graph here and put a tag in, and let me put in, because I've tied that to the PLC, and I won't be able to get data in there very easily. Let's put pressure in here, and let's just shoot pressure. And because I don't have a PLC connected, let me add a symbol. Now I want to talk a bit about symbols here in a few minutes, but just to let you know, we have a really nice symbol library, not only for push buttons and pilot lights and switches and things of that nature, but we also have some new 3D motors, some pumps, and we're also adding all of the time, actually weekly, to our website here under the store, under free add-ons. We're adding symbols all the time. Now, why would you care at a packaging webinar about symbols? Well, as I mentioned, that I/O faceplate is a symbol. We have some gauges, some indicators, but some really neat things that might relate to packaging. Here's some dashboard type symbols, some production monitoring. This one happens to be really neat, this Andon symbol set that again is free for download. Also has a video on how to use these symbols. And in under 15 minutes, I created an entire production monitoring system just using those symbols and configuring those. So again, feel free to come and download those or take a look to see if they're already in your version of InduSoft Web Studio. But stack lights and also things like thermostats and temperature monitoring faceplates and temperature control faceplates, things of that nature are all here, and again, free for download. If you have any requests, let us know. We'd be happy to take a look at, see if we can't develop something for you. So lots of different new, and again, these update weekly on the website. So let me pull this out of the way here. So the whole reason why I did this is because I wanted to grab a slider for my project here to be able to change that value for temperature. I'm sorry, not temperature. I changed that to pressure. And so now I should be able to run this project and be able to change that value here. Okay, I can do that. Let me get rid of that other bar graph in there. And again, I'm heading down the path and talking about data collection. What I'm going to do before I do that is show you this trend object and how easy it is to trend different information here. So I have that tag called pressure, which might be a label on there, might be pounds per square inch. I'm going to put that tag in there. Now I don't want to type it. I will likely mistype it. So I'm going to select that. And you don't have to put a scale factor in here, but it will auto scale, but it makes it a little bit easier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and change this to a custom color, maybe a thicker line, and a fill color underneath the pen. And what I might do is choose that same color, but it'll be 50% transparent here, and show you what that looks like when I'm logging in this case, or displaying, because this object does not log. When I'm displaying the pressure, this should update. And again, that object, this trend object by itself does not log. It has the ability to show tag information like I'm showing here, or the ability to read from a database, or a couple of other formats as well. So I'm going to put some data in here, and again, that's not logging. Now, before we go set up the logging, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go set up a database, a SQL database. And what I'm going to do is create a brand new database using this SQL Management Studio from Microsoft. Now this is for Microsoft SQL Server Express, what I have on here. And this is going to allow me to configure the database. This is kind of the management tool or the configuration tool. Notice that I'm going to connect to my SQL database engine, and I'm going to use this format here where it's connecting to my PC, and then the name of the database or the name of the server is SQL Express. Now this is important because when I create my project, I'm not going to make it point to my PC. I'm going to use another notation here that'll make it portable and easy to find the database. Also notice that I'm using built-in Windows security here. So with those two things, I'm going to go ahead and connect to the database. And when this starts up, this is going to allow me to connect up to SQL Server engine, if you will. And you can see that I do quite a fair amount of demos here. But I'm going to create a new database, and we're going to create a brand new database, and I'll call it, I created packaging webinar this morning. We'll call this packaging afternoon. You could name this database whatever you wanted to. And again, this is Microsoft's configuration tool. This is not an InduSoft product. But these usually creates a database at the end of this list. And what I want to do is expand this and show you that there's no additional tables other than the system tables in here. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. And now what I'm going to do is down here in the Tasks tab, create a trend or a logging worksheet where I might put that pressure in here. And instead of going to a file on the hard drive, which is the default, I'm going to add this connection to the database. Well, before I do that, I have to set up a connection to that database. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then what I'm going to do is go here under Project and Options, and I'm going to set up a connection to the default database throughout the entire project. And I have to have my project stopped first. Sorry about that. Set up the default connection. Now, if I knew the connection string and how to get to that database, I could type it in here, or I could put a string type tag in here and make it flexible and changeable during runtime. Or I'm going to use this little wizard here that will allow us to configure this if I don't really know what I'm doing here. Now, what I'm going to do is choose a particular provider that might be for whatever database that I'm going to. You can see here we can go to Oracle, we can go to Access, we can use this Jet provider to go to different Microsoft Office products, but I'm going to end up using this SQL Server provider here. Now, this next button essentially walks you through these tabs at the top. So when I click on Next, you'll see that it goes to the connection. Now, I pointed this out when I had the Management Studio open. It had my PC name / SQL Express. Instead of doing my PC name, I'm going to type in here local, and you could type in the IP address of another database or another PC somewhere else. But then I'm going to use that SQL Express, which is the name of that database that's on my PC. But by putting local in front of here, it says go to my local PC, and it keeps this portable wherever you move this. Really nice idea and concept there. I'm also going to use built-in Windows security. Now at this point, it already is able to talk to SQL Express or the engine. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it, go ahead and show me, query what databases you have out there. And I'm going to choose the packaging afternoon database, test my connection, and I can see that I've already got a good connection to that database. All my permissions and things of that nature are set up right. And go ahead and click on OK here. So I've set up that connection to that database as my default connection. Now I can go back into that trend worksheet where I put that pressure tag, and now instead of logging to the proprietary file on the hard drive, I can say use the database. And now I can look at my configuration here. There's that connection that we just made to the database. And by default, it's going to use this trend worksheet name, this trend 001. It's going to automatically create this database. Let's say I don't want to use that table name, and I want to put in my own. Let's call this I don't know, production. And say OK. Now that table doesn't exist, and it's going to automatically create it when I run this. And this will, by default, log every second. And if you want to know more about trending and logging, you can certainly check out our different webinars that we've had or our training videos online. We have a whole bunch of those free of charge. And so now when I run my project, this will actually be logging that data. If you notice here that I started out at 24, we'll let that take a couple of samples. We'll slam it up to 100. Let that take a couple of samples. And then we'll come down to 41. So if you remember those different things, if you didn't, take a look at this. I can actually pause this, and I can click and get a cursor. So the cursor value was 24. Then I went up to 100, and then I went to 41. So real handy way to use that cursor. Let's tab back to my database here. Now I'm going to refresh the tables here. I'm going to right-click, click on Refresh. You can see it automatically created that production table. And then I can right-click, Edit Top 200 Rows, and that should show you there's my 24, there's the 100, and then there's the 41, and in fact it's still logging in the background as we speak. So there's database connectivity and how to do that. Some other ideas that we have are symbols and mnemonics. I talked about the symbols, I showed you those, but I wanted to bring up the fact that related to packaging and some of the ideas on how to do this, if I bring up a screen, let's say, and I wanted to put a symbol on here. Let's take this slider symbol because I've already used it. If you take a look at the way that these properties are set up, these are actually what's called custom properties. Notice that there's a property column and a value column. And let me do this. Let me actually bring in a new one and let this overwrite. Say yes. So now when I click on this, what I'd like to show you is that by default, the minimum is 0, the maximum is 100, and the tag name is blank. And where does this come from? Well, when you create a symbol, you can actually use this special syntax. And if I go in and edit this and then ungroup this, you're going to see that this symbol, this little slider here, has a vertical position on it. And you'll see that the minimum is 0, the maximum is 100, and the tag name is blank. And the notation is a £, the name of the property column, colon, and then the default value. And that's what that syntax actually creates this custom properties. And by using that, you can create symbols that are going to be very relevant for packaging and maybe show parts of your machine or product and be able to define those and reuse those with graphical consistency. The other neat thing is that when you use a symbol in your project, it actually makes a copy of it and puts it into your project, so it stays with your project. And that way, if you make any changes, so for example, if I go into this slider and say I want this panel here, instead of being gray, I want it to be this kind of olive green color. When I save this, and it says, hey, you've got to save your screens if you want this to take effect, it's gone through and it's updated all of my symbols in my entire project. So not only graphical consistency, but those custom properties as well as the linked capability, that design link back to that one symbol, are the three ideas that come with symbols. And I wanted to point out too, that same notation or that idea of notation can be used, for example, if you were to create a pop-up screen or as a template, let's say, the configured motors or pumps, and let's put a pump on here, let's say. And again, if you created a screen that was specifically like a pop-up screen, let's say, you could use that same symbol notation and pop up the pump configuration screen. And if you had 10 pumps, you wouldn't have to create 10 different screens. You can actually pass in those variables and only have to create one screen. And that's using a concept that we have called Mnemonics, using that same notation. We've got a really good webinar that was done just a few weeks ago up on our website. I highly suggest that you take a look at that and see some efficiencies there. Again, using recipes to reduce product changeover times, scalability, being able to create a single project for multiple deployments, multiple runtime environments. And I said that we can create applications for resolutions 240 by 240 to 10,000 by 10,000. You could create video walls out of that, or use orientation, landscape, or portrait to be able to get the best fit. Maybe by turning the computer sideways, you might be able to fit it in a different place on your machine, or it might show the data the best way. But I wanted to show this auto scale feature. So the reason why I developed my screen at 1024 by 768 resolution was to show you that here on my 1920 by 1080, I've got a lot of extra space left over. What I can do is I can actually go into my project, into the viewer here, and say I want auto screen scaling. And then when I run my project, it basically makes it as large as it can without distorting the objects. So in this case, it made it as large as it could and filled the space. And you could actually put another small screen in here with either alarm information or whatever event information and make it configurable that way. But really nice way to automatically scale independent on what hardware you're running up. Again, as a large or long machine, use a secure viewer thin client. And I wanted to talk real quick. I'm going to go just a couple minutes long here. I only have one or two more slides. The availability to be scalable. One project can fit all, can be very efficient. And I just showed you that auto scale resolution, thin client. Viewing a machine from an office using the web thin client, secure viewer as a remote HMI for large or long machines. It's a great option for production information, hanging a large screen up in the sky. And I didn't add it into the slide, but using SMA to remotely view and interact on tablets can also be efficient. And I wanted to talk about predictive concepts. You know, it wasn't so long ago that an HMI just replaced meters and push buttons and lights, but now you're getting much more advanced data collection and data handling. So why not take a look at is a pump maybe that's driving something, a motor that's driving a pump has a higher current draw than normal. You know, you can trend those things and see visually, oh, the current draw over the last couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months has gone up and up and up. You know, there's a good chance that that motor on that pump is going to fail, and replace it when it's convenient for you, not when it's, you know, you absolutely need to get production out. The other idea is to take a look at and trend set point versus actual, whatever your set point may be. And if you've got, let's say, RPMs of a motor that's falling farther and farther away from, you know, maybe the set point is at 300 RPMs and you only got to 280 or 270 or 260 today, and you can see that differential, that visual differential. Well, again, use that to predict if there's going to be a problem when it's convenient for you, not when it's you know, 5 o'clock on a Friday or something. Some resources that we have, and again, we're going to make this presentation available along with the recording of the webinar, usually in just a couple of days. We have a packaging brochure. These are all links on here, so when you take a look at that the slide deck, these are all links to our website. All of these are on our website. But the packaging brochure has done something really neat. Basically, we took an entire packaging line and we broke it down into roughly 11 different types of machines, whether they're capping or cartoning or inspection, filling or shrink wrap, or the different types of machines, and kind of said what types of information and what features within InduSoft Web Studio are related. We also have some really great webinars on vision, on packaging, and creating custom symbols, as well as some packaging-related case studies. Take a look at our case studies on our webpage. And again, if you're interested in participating in either a case study or a webinar, let us know. Get a hold of us. Send us an email at info@indusoft.com. We'd love to hear from you. I didn't get any questions during the webinar, so maybe there weren't any questions, or maybe I just answered everything that you had to ask. So now I'd like to open it up for questions. If there's any questions, love to hear from you. I'm going to flip back into the development environment and bring up the demo again and show you some of the really neat applications or demonstrations that we have in there. Again, I'm opening up to questions. If there's anybody who'd like to ask something, well, let me know, and I'd be happy to try and answer your question. In the demo, again, this is not only a sales tool, but this is kind of a technical resource for you. If you want to know how we did something, how we made something move, how we did something, feel free to take a look at this and look at our scripting. Here's some examples of some 3D CAD images that were brought in that we animated over the top of with our symbols. Here's some ovens, some waters, some different vessels and some different tanks. Again, we're opening up for questions. If you have anything, I want to show you these demos where we're looking for questions. Also notice that we can rotate our trends 90 degrees, almost like a strip chart recorder. I don't know if any other product is doing that. Process, show some different piping and different valves and things of that nature. Here's food and beverage. I can put this in automatic mode. Open and close my valves. Look, again, it's challenging me for security. Maybe look at the individual tanks and what their levels are. Let's put this back into automatic mode and watch that tank level go. Hopefully hopefully up and down as we get different things in here. But you can see that you can do animations with this. Here's some different ideas of some data displays. And again, we've got symbols for a lot of different functionality on different machines. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar because we didn't have any questions come in. But I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance today and joining us, and your interest in InduSoft and our products. We really appreciate it. And again, if you have an idea for a webinar topic, let us know in the survey. Let us know how we did today. And if you'd like to participate in a webinar, be a co-host, if you will, or take a look at a case study and maybe get your company some free press and help you guys sell more products, we'd love to work with you on that. Let us know. With that, I'd like to end the webinar and thank you, everybody. Have a pleasant day, pleasant evening, wherever you're at, and join us again. Thanks.